Here's the situation a lot of dividend investors find themselves in. They've done the research, they've screened for yield, they've built a portfolio, maybe 15, 20 positions, and they're collecting income every month. But somewhere around year 2 or 3, something starts to feel off. A payout gets cut. An ETF starts bleeding NAV. A fund they trusted starts quietly returning their own money back to them as income. And they realize not all dividend income is created equal. There's a version of dividend investing where you're essentially renting yield, chasing whatever pays the most right now, not thinking too hard about what's underneath it. And then there's a different version, one where the companies you own have been raising their dividends year after year through recessions, rate hikes, market panics for decades. Not because they had to, because their businesses are that durable. That's what this video is about. 3 stocks, 3 very different business models, but each one has something rare, a multi-decade track record of growing the dividend, not just maintaining it, growing it, every single year. Let's start with what this actually means for a long-term income investor. Most people think about dividend yield the wrong way. They see a 5% or 6% yield and think that's the goal. And yield matters, of course it does, but there's something more important than the current yield, what the yield on your original investment will look like in 10 years. A stock paying 2% today, growing its dividend at 8% per year, will yield roughly 4.3% on your original investment in 10 years. At 15 years, closer to 6.3%. The power isn't in the yield you start with, it's in the compounding of a growing income stream on a fixed cost basis. According to research from Hartford funds, companies that have consistently grown their dividends have historically outperformed those that haven't, and with lower volatility. That's not a coincidence. Growing dividends are a byproduct of growing earnings, disciplined management, and real competitive moats. The 3 companies we're looking at today have been proving that, in some cases, for over half a century.
Stock number 1 is Realty Income, ticker O. And if you've been in the income investing world for any amount of time, you've probably heard of it. Realty Income is a real estate investment trust, or REIT. It owns over 15,571 commercial properties across the United States and Europe as of the most recent quarterly report. Think grocery-anchored strip malls, drugstores, dollar stores, convenience stores, fitness centers, tenants like Dollar General, Dollar Tree, FedEx, 7-Eleven, and Walgreens. What makes Realty Income's structure so durable is the lease structure. Nearly all of its properties operate under what are called triple net leases. That means the tenant pays not just rent, but also property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. Realty Income essentially collects a check every month and doesn't have to worry about the building's operating expenses. That's an unusual arrangement, and it leads to unusually predictable cash flows. REITs are also legally required to distribute at least 90% of their taxable income to shareholders, which is why Realty Income pays a monthly dividend and has raised it every single year since 1994. That's 31 consecutive years of annual dividend increases. In fact, as of June 2026, the company just announced its 135th dividend increase since listing on the NYSE. At recent prices, the stock yields around 5.3%. Now, a yield that high raises an obvious question. Can they sustain it? REITs don't use net income the way a regular company does. They use a metric called Adjusted Funds from Operations, or AFFO. It strips out depreciation and other non-cash items to give a cleaner picture of actual cash available for dividends. In the first quarter of 2026, Realty Income's AFFO came in at $1.13 per diluted share, up 6.6% year over year, and the quarterly dividend represented 71.7% of that AFFO. That's a very comfortable level. Management has also raised its full year 2026 AFFO guidance to between $4.41 and $4.44 per share. The dividend looks well covered. The real risk worth watching is interest rates. Realty Income carries debt. It has to acquire properties at scale. When rates rise sharply, borrowing costs increase and the stock tends to get repriced lower. We saw that play out meaningfully in 2022 and 2023. But here's what also happened. The company kept raising its dividend through all of it. No single tenant represents more than 3.3% of annualized base rent. That diversification is intentional. It insulates Realty Income from any single tenant's trouble. And with occupancy holding at 98.9% as of the most recent quarter, the underlying portfolio remains in good shape. For income investors looking for monthly cash flow, a track record measured in decades, and a business model that's genuinely hard to replicate, Realty Income deserves to be on the short list. Stock number 2, S&P Global, the quiet compounder. The second name is going to surprise some income investors because the current dividend yield is less than 1%, around 0.94%. That's S&P Global, ticker SPGI. And if you look just at the yield, you might move on immediately, but that would be a mistake because the reason the yield looks so low is that the stock has delivered a total return of roughly 388% over the past decade, including dividends. When a company's stock price compounds that aggressively, the yield looks small, but the investor who bought 10 years ago is sitting on a very different picture. S&P Global has been raising its dividend for 53 consecutive years. That puts it in the Dividend Kings category, companies that have grown their payout for 50 years or more. There are fewer than 50 of them in the entire US stock market. The dividend payout ratio is around 24%, which means the company is barely scratching the surface of what it could distribute. That's a sign of a business with enormous earnings coverage. So what does S&P Global actually do? A few things, but the core of the business is credit ratings. When companies or governments want to issue bonds, they need a rating from an agency like S&P, Moody's, or Fitch. S&P Global holds a dominant position in that market globally. It's effectively a duopoly, and it has been for decades. The barriers to entry here are genuinely awk. Ratings agencies need regulatory approval, decades of track record, and widespread institutional trust. Nobody is disrupting this business next year or likely next decade. Beyond ratings, S&P Global also runs market intelligence, data and analytics on a recurring subscription model, and owns the S&P 500 and Dow Jones indices. Every index fund, every ETF tied to those benchmarks pays licensing fees. The more money that flows into passive investing, the more S&P Global earns. That's an elegant structural tailwind. There's also a near-term catalyst worth understanding. S&P Global is spinning off its mobility division as a standalone public company called Mobility Global, ticker MBGL. Shareholders of record as of June 15th are entitled to receive 1 share of Mobility Global for every share of SPGI they hold, with the distribution effective July 1st, 2026. The remaining core business, ratings, intelligence, indices, energy, is what investors hold going forward. Now, here's an interesting wrinkle for 2026. The stock is down roughly 17% year-to-date, caught up in the broader selling of software and data-related companies, partly over AI disruption concerns. Whether those fears are overblown or not is a legitimate debate, but the result is that SPGI is trading at around 21 times forward earnings, well below its 10-year average PE of nearly 38. For a business with this quality of moat and this length of dividend growth, that's an entry point that hasn't been available in several years. This isn't a stock for someone who needs 5% income tomorrow. It's for someone who wants a business that will be more valuable and paying more dividends in 10 or 20 years than it is today.
Stock number 3, Aflac, the underappreciated insurer. The third name is Aflac, ticker AFL, and it's probably the most underappreciated of the three. Aflac is a supplemental insurance company. It sells policies that pay out when something bad happens to you, an accident, a cancer diagnosis, a critical illness, as a complement to your primary health insurance. It's not competing with your main health plan, it's filling the gaps your main plan doesn't cover. That distinction matters. Aflac doesn't carry the same risk profile as a traditional property and casualty insurer. It's more predictable. People pay premiums, claims are actuarially manageable, and the renewal rates are high. The current yield sits around 2.1%.
What most people don't think about is how Aflac sells its policies. A significant portion comes through payroll deduction partnerships, meaning an employer offers Aflac as a voluntary benefit, premiums come out of paychecks automatically, and the policyholder rarely cancels because cancellation requires active effort. That's a remarkably sticky revenue model. The other piece of the story is Japan. Aflac has a commanding presence in the Japanese supplemental insurance market. It is the leading provider of cancer and medical insurance in Japan by policies in force. In the most recent quarter, the company saw higher new sales across its cancer, medical, and life insurance products in Japan. That international diversification is a real part of the earnings base, though it does introduce yen currency risk that investors should be aware of. Aflac also has a substantial investment portfolio. Premiums collected up front get invested in U.S. Treasuries and corporate bonds while policies are in force. In a higher interest rate environment, that float generates meaningful additional income. 43 consecutive years of dividend increases as of 2026, with the most recent increase coming in at 5.2% for Q1. That number spans oil shocks, Black Monday, the dot-com bust, the 2008 financial crisis, a global pandemic. Through all of it, Aflac raised its dividend. The payout ratio sits around 27% of earnings, which means there is enormous runway for continued increases even if earnings growth slows. In Q1 2026 alone, the company returned $1.3 billion to shareholders through a combination of dividends and share buybacks. That's a business deploying capital with confidence. That's not luck. That's a business model that generates reliable earnings regardless of the economic environment people think is most dangerous right now. Most investors spend time looking for the next great stock, the next catalyst, the next thing about to pop. There's a different way to think about it. Some of the most powerful investments aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the ones that are quietly, consistently, year after year, putting more money in your pocket than they did the year before. Not because of a hot market, not because of a trend, but because the underlying business is genuinely built to last. The question isn't whether those track records are impressive. They are. The real question is whether you have the patience to own a business long enough to let that compounding work for you. That's the discipline that separates income investors who build something lasting from those who are always looking for the next yield to chase.